12s, and welcome to the Seahawks 360 podcast, a Sports Ethos production where we look at the Seahawks from every angle, every week. I'm Candace Higgins,
And I'm Tino Ganasius.
and we are here to break down week one of actual NFL football, which is super exciting to say. This Sunday was a little bit of heaven for me. I've been enjoying watching all the other games, of course, with having just football back in general, but there is nothing like watching Seahawks football, particularly under this new era of Mike Macdonald and everything that brings with it. So the Seahawks walk away from week one of the Mike Macdonald era with 1-0. One win taken away from the Denver Broncos, to the dismay of many Broncos fans who just really were confident that they were going to come in here and get a W. Geno Smith had a mixed bag of a game, no doubt, with 171 yards, one touchdown, one interception. Kenneth Walker had 103 yards, explosive game from him, and Tyler Lockett led the team with catches and yards at 77 yards on 6 catches. Bo Nix struggled in this game mightily as he threw for 138 yards, but a whopping 26 of 42 from the field, which is wild. He took 2 sacks, 2 interceptions, 0 touchdowns, and they struggled to get their running game off of the ground, which is really nice to say. Denver was not able to get much going outside of Bo Nix, who did lead the team in rushing yards with 35 yards on 5 carries. So those are your basic box score numbers if you're going to look at it from a big picture perspective. You didn't know anything about this game, you look at it and you probably wouldn't be too surprised by too much of the general statistics if you looked at it. But if you watch this game, it was probably one of the most adventurous games you can watch of the week for sure. This team had a ton of adversity overcome basically from the snap. I mean, really from go. Started off with sack, interception. You had 2 safeties in one single half, which I don't believe has been done. I want to say I saw somebody say 1961 or something like that. It's been forever, and apparently the last time that happened, it was actually a Broncos versus Seahawks game, which is really weird. But anyway, extremely adventurous game. So Tino, I am eager to get your thoughts on just, man, what did you think about the way that this game went?
So top level, or taking it from a 35,000 foot perspective, first takeaway is interior line play was so bad. And I know we'll get into it, but literally the offense couldn't get off the ground. Didn't matter what you were doing conceptually because the offensive line couldn't get out of its own way. Responsible for 2 safeties, Geno's backpedaling, running for his life the entire time. So whatever concepts Ryan Grubb came into this season with, 3, I'd say 2 above average to elite receivers and 1 probably league average receiver in Lockett, and an above average running back, whatever concepts you have, which may be brilliant, they don't matter if your guards can't block. They couldn't run block. They couldn't pass block. They couldn't do anything. That's my first takeaway. Now, offensively, I think what they proved over the course of the entire game is that there is talent, that Geno Smith is very good. K9 is very good. The receivers are very good. So we'll get to that and why they were able to get to a place where they could actually perform, right, and play well. Defensively, I loved it. I loved it. And I know that Denver scored 20 points, but the one kind of high level takeaway is they were swarming to the ball. They were playing with passion. And you felt like the most talented players, right? Reek Woolen, Witherspoon, they were put in positions to succeed. I think what you can count on from day one from this new coaching staff is they will put this defense in positions to succeed. Whereas I think that Pete Carroll oftentimes, and I hate to say this because I love Pete, but I think towards the end of his tenure, he was actually setting a lot of his players up to fail with the scheme, right? And it wasn't a good fit with the players' skill set. And so what we saw was Reek Woolen in just seeing these guys in man, I think is the starting point. But we saw great safety play. We saw really good linebacker play, which I don't know if we expected. I don't know. I walked away seeing a passionate defense. seeing a defense that I think is potentially top 10 down the road, maybe top 10 this year, and an offense that showed signs of, in the second half of being balanced. My big takeaway for the offense is, and I think in general in the NFL, you have to be balanced. You cannot play. Why not? As much as I love running the ball all the time in college works. In the pros, it doesn't. You have to have some form of balance. And so I think they were a little pass happy in the beginning. They're probably really excited to get their concepts out there and all the things they were working on. And it didn't work because Bradford and Tomlinson were just getting tore up, right? But then once they started running the ball and getting that Denver defense a little bit more off balance, they were able to throw the ball a little bit more because they had balance. Those were my initial takeaways. I'm excited about this team. I don't think there was anything about this game that on the negative for me, like moving forward long-term, other than the guard play. The guard play has to change yesterday. The guard play was freaking terrible. We can get into some of the positives in a minute. My boy, Charles Cross, number 1 PFF tackle in football, week 1. There's some good stuff to take away too. But yeah, I'm excited. There's nothing that happened to dampen my enthusiasm other than you have to block in the middle of the line. We're lucky that Christian Barmore is out for the Patriots next week. He's their best defensive lineman. He's probably their best defensive player. And unfortunately, he's out for the season, it looks like, with a health condition. But they got to get that squared away soon, or else they're going to get eaten alive by some of these teams with good D tackles.
Yeah, for me, this game was a confirmation about a lot of the things that I thought this team was. And I would say that was a little bit more to the extreme on both ends. This defense was even better than I thought it would be. I thought I had very high expectations for the defense, but I also knew that it was their first game and that there might be some bumps in the road. And it's been, I can't even tell you, I mean, probably since Legion of Boom days before I've seen a defense specifically, be backed up against a wall, be put in disadvantageous situations so frequently as they were, and be able to come out on top consistently. Game 1, I just feel like that was dramatically above any expectations. I wouldn't have had any issues at all had they allowed a touchdown, after coming quickly off the field and have a quick sudden change, and now they're back on the field trying to, basically, I mean, they're in the red zone, like off top, and to prevent and make those stands right there in the red zone off the top, really impressive. So super excited about the defense. I agree with you, Tino. And also one of my major concerns by the time, I'll say this, in the preseason, as you know, my concerns were safety, linebacker, but as the preseason developed, as training camp developed, those began to become lesser concerns for me. And the increasing concern for me was the interior of this offensive line. Right. Like that was a regular thing. The fact that between Bradford and Haynes, that nobody really won that battle. I never I know what's coming. The concept of Laken Tomlinson as a starter on my team from day 1. I had a terrible feeling about it. If he was going to be a starter, it's fine for him if they were going to have him as depth, but that was obviously not the plan. Unfortunately, I thought that Connor Williams was a huge upgrade, and Lord have mercy if they hadn't have gotten Connor Williams, who seemed to have done a pretty decent job for his first game, coming off of a major knee injury and really not having any time to learn concepts and communication. That center position seemed flawless, as if he had been there. Not flawless, but I mean, really well executed.
He played well.
A guy. Yeah. For a guy facing his circumstances. I mean, he just got to camp, like 3 weeks ago or something. Anyway, so really impressive on that front, but that was even a bigger concern. So as concerned as I was about it, I did think the offense would be able to function, and I was wrong. I was dead wrong about that.
I think they did. I think the running game, and we'll get into this obviously, but I do think that the running game got to a place where it wasn't just to provide balance, right? I think K9 is very talented, and I think they found some concepts that worked for this particular line in that third quarter and into the fourth. And to me, that's going to be, we may see them key off of that moving forward, because if you can do one thing successfully, it'll open up the other thing. And the only way they're going to keep the pass rush off of Geno was backpedaling for his life in that first half.
Yeah.
The only way you keep the pass rush off Geno in every other game is going to be the threat of the run, because you don't have pure pass blockers other than at left tackle. One thing I wanted to add, I'd be remiss to not comment on the tackling in this game, because I think for a long time, we watched Seahawks teams that couldn't tackle. And it was really frustrating, right? You knew if they were headed towards, Wagner, he'd probably make the tackle. But there were a lot of other players on that defense that couldn't. And you saw, I think it's something, well, I know it's something that Coach McDonald demands from his players. You must tackle to play in his defense. And you saw that in this game. It was the swarming. It was wrapping up. It was, the kinds of things where you would watch previous Seahawks defenses and it'd be 3rd and 9 and they'd get 12. And you're like, why aren't you standing 8 yards out ready to tackle them, or standing at the first down marker and pouncing on the ball if you're playing this zone? And you saw this team yesterday actually tackle the guy in front of the first down marker and keep him from getting a first down. 3rd and 9, the Broncos are getting 7. And you've got 2-3 guys tackling as opposed to just one. To me, that's conceptually, you're doing the right thing. You're teaching the right thing. And so I'd be remiss to not mention the fact that they tackled very soundly, and unlike, I think, a lot of Seahawks teams since the Legion of Boom.
Yeah, most definitely. That's something that stood out 100% for me. But I would say the only real surprise for me was probably how bad special teams were. That debacle was, I think, one of the worst mistakes I'd ever seen. Brady Henderson said it so well. I mean, not only did you what did he not call for he called for a fair catch within the 10, and then you hop on the ball. Man, if you don't catch the ball, you just fall on it. And he had the opportunity was there for him to just fall on the ball. Right. No, he wants to try to grab it, then fumbles that. Right. I mean, abject disaster. Mm-hmm. The safeties were weird because they weren't like Geno getting sacked in the end zone type things. Like Anthony Bradford being responsible for a safety is wild to me.
Right.
So just some of the miscues in that regard, I thought, despite the newness of the coaching staff, I guess I just didn't envision it manifesting itself like that. But other than that, this team is to more extreme versions than what I thought they were. Now, I think there's a ton of room for growth because they were able to still get the win. And I think the key for me, and probably the most impressive thing for me, is coaching adjustments, particularly on the offense. And I'll even say special teams, because they really, after that, it sort of cleaned things up from a special teams perspective after a really rough first half. Second half adjustments were key. I saw a lot more. One of the things I went back, or Tino and I sort of did before we hopped on and record here, is just go back and look at the run game, because my impression of the first half wasn't that they weren't trying to run the ball.
Right.
It just wasn't successful. And because, like you said, the offensive line literally couldn't even run. Like, they weren't doing anything well at that point. And also, the team wasn't on the field long enough to really see. Now, I do agree that just based on tendencies, it seemed to be pass happy, but it didn't seem completely imbalanced given the very small sample size of first half snaps that we saw. But they ran on 10 out of the 25 plays that they ran in that first half. So they attempted to run the ball, but what they did was change formations. I noticed immediately that you saw much more condensed formations when they came out of that second half. And I haven't had the chance to go back and look at all 22 to see, like, the types they seem to run. It looks like, I did do some PFF digging. It looks like they decided to run heavy against Charles Cross, either
On the
between
left side,
tackle
yeah.
and Cross, or inside, like on the opposite side of Cross, between Cross and the guard.
Hmm.
Those Kenneth Walker runs were the most successful, averaging 12 yards per attempt when they did go in that direction. So that was probably a really big part of their second half adjustments. They found what worked and they stuck with that. And I think that's really the only thing that made the O-line look passable, is it just shifted away from trying to do things with those other guys who looked abysmal, and they
Right.
really stuck to their strength, which at the time was Charles Cross. And I will admit, really surprised on that. I didn't think that Charles Cross would ever post a 90 anything in
Hmm.
PFF. He posted a team high, was it
I think 92,
94.8?
94 in the run grade, and I think 92 overall is what I saw, something like that.
Yeah, no, yeah, 94.8 was his overall grade,
Mhm.
79.5 pass blocking, and 96.1 run.
Oof.
Impeccable.
Well, so here's something that I'm hoping, we get overly complicated, I think at times. Coaching gets overly complicated, adjustments do. But if you've got a left tackle that can block, or you got a couple of dudes that can block, especially in the run game, run behind those guys until they decide to put half their defense, in front of that guy. If you know Charles Cross is dominating, just run behind him, right? It seems really elementary, but the reality is we get so caught up in some of these other details and we forget. If you have a Walter Jones, or you have an Orlando Pace, or you have someone who's that Steve Hutchinson, right? You just run behind that dude. And,
Yep.
and until they stop it. And to me, the fact that Charles Cross was that guy week one is a huge step in the right direction for this offense. You can find, I believe, you can find serviceable guards somewhere. You might have to give up some draft capital. You might have to give something up to bring them in, but you can find serviceable guard play. Find a left tackle that can be that good, even if he's a half notch below what he did in this first week. If you find a left tackle that is that good, you're talking about, like, that's why they get picked in the top 5 in drafts, right? Is to provide that stability. And especially, he wasn't, I don't always think of him as a great run blocker. I think of him as good on his feet, can protect in the pass game. You don't think of him as a road grader in the run game. So if this is something that he's going to be doing moving forward, this is a big, big surprise to me. And I was on record saying I thought he was going to be all pro.
He
And
was.
this is still a surprise to see him be that dominant. So to me, that was super cool. And it was super cool to see a coaching staff that's not sticking so much to their guns as far as what they wanted to do at the beginning of the game, that they were willing to just say, man, this dude is balling out. Let's just run behind our big first round pick left tackle, and let him eat, let him go. And that, to me, that's why Kenneth Walker was so successful, as you said.
Yeah, yeah, agreed. I mean, how many times did we say last season that this thing worked?
Mm-hmm.
Noah Fant getting yards after catch worked.
Mm-hmm.
Zach Charbonnet in power gap running schemes worked. And they just completely went away from it. Shane Waldron would just see something that went great and then decide, cool, that was great. Now we're gonna go back to whatever, he thinks works best. And I appreciate having a guy with no NFL experience in Ryan Grubb, just like you said, keeping it simple.
Yep.
Like smash the button on what works until they force you to, like, spam it until they force you to stop it. And that's exactly what they did. And it ultimately was the difference between the Seahawks having a really disappointing loss at home and ultimately fighting things out to victory. And also with adjustments, the defense, I don't think they sort of adjusted a little bit. I think they sort of, eventually made Bo Nix. I think they gradually made his life harder as the game went on, and you could sort of see that in his performance. It wasn't a ton of adjustments that they did. They were pretty consistent throughout the game, but you just appreciate his level head. He's really big on poise.
Yep.
And you love to see a coach who's talked about a concept or talked about an idea or identity that he wants his team to embrace, and for him to be the epitome of that when adversity hits, because that's really when you find out if you have a good coach or not. And
Yep.
we'd always talked about that we wouldn't really find out, you don't really know a coach until things get tough.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, this is just the Broncos, it's just Bo Nix. And, there are harder competition. Miami's going to be tough. Like there are really tough competitions coming. You got to play the 49ers twice, all of that. But you like to see him face literally everything that could have went wrong. And from fumbled snaps on special teams to just poor bad plays on special teams, getting lit, allowing the Broncos to pin them all the way to the what is it, 2 yard line, 1 yard, 1 yard line. You got Anthony Bradford creating safeties. I mean, really everything. Geno throwing interceptions, facing all of those things, galvanize in halftime, keep the poise, like he always talks about, and to stick with it and find a way to win in the end, and to take control of the game. That is extremely impressive for a first-time head coach, the youngest coach in the league, and that's what people were worried about, coming from Pete Carroll, going to the youngest coach in the NFL. Would that be a problem? I think you saw your first glimpse of that, and so far, it's early in the season, but the answer is he's not too big for the moments.
No. And this defense is the moments aren't too big for him.
Yeah, the moments aren't too big.
Yeah. This defense, though, I think there's so much fight in it, right? And you go level to level with the defense, and you look at the individual personalities, and Leonard Williams and Byron Murphy, they're not going to stop fighting. They're not going to let this team, Jarran Reed, those guys are just going to keep pushing and keep pushing. Spoon and Woolen are going to keep pushing. And there's a belief on that defense that you could feel, I feel like. And then the other cool thing for me is that, so you knew those guys would show out, but then Julian Love has 12 tackles, right? And I think he was the highest rated safety according to PFF this week. Yep. And then, Dotson has 10 tackles, and Jenkins lays some lumber, and he looks like a real strong safety, right? It was the guys who I didn't necessarily expect to be great, or I just expected them to be a name or plug a hole in the defense a little bit, actually played better than that. So those were, to me, it was just really, really encouraging on the defensive end. And I think, to your point about who Mike Macdonald is, the defense, like you said, was put in some really bad situations in this game, and they just kept fighting. You saw it in their actions that they didn't care. They were like, all right, let's go. Let's do this. They weren't pouting. They weren't upset. They were pumping each other up. And I do think it comes down to, obviously, coaching and leadership, but also the personality of the individuals on that defense. This is a defense that, for me, is so fun to watch and so exciting. And then the athleticism of, like, Derek Hall flashes that athleticism where you feel like he could be a star. You heard on the broadcast him talking about Spoon in more of a Kyle Hamilton role. And I don't know that I thought about him quite that way. I thought of him as just a corner who's going to play some slot, but really what he is just a football player. And I think we saw that in week one, where that's what Coach Macdonald sees too. He's like, this dude is just a bad, what? And so we're just going to use him all over the place. We don't have to confine him to a corner, to outside corner or nickel. You don't even give him a title. You just put him in position to succeed. So I don't know. We didn't get that much from Murphy. We didn't get that much from Morris. We didn't really get anything from Draymond Jones. They're players who still can step up and give more, and yet this defense looked amazing.
Yeah, I definitely want to get into the nuances of the defense here in a second. But here's a fun fact, and just for those who might be relatively new to the show or don't listen that often, you'll hear me as we go throughout the season regularly refer to PFF. Now, PFF is a flawed system, and I will be the first to admit that there's a flawed system. I think you do have to match it up with what you see on the field. Sometimes it's not always going to line up. It's not perfect, but it is a pretty universal way to just sort of relatively compare players. And so I think there really aren't too many systems like it. So as much as people do criticize it, like, there really aren't just accessible ways to compare players otherwise. And here's a fun fact that I noticed that I have yet to see. Maybe it's been brought up, but I have yet to see brought up by anyone. So I did look at just all the teams in just how PFF graded them, and the Seahawks had the highest overall team grade by PFF in the NFL week one, and they were graded a 91.3. overall,
Huh.
a 91.3 overall. The second team was the Saints, who whooped the Panthers, and they were graded at 84.5,
Wow.
which is a massive difference between first and second place. And so PFF, for all their flaws, must think extremely highly of this team and its execution, because PFF pays attention to the finer details, right? And so they don't get caught up as much in the storylines that we're going to be talking about. They play close attention from the snap to snap consistency. And I think they may, I don't know if they're taking into account things like being backed up in like the defense work. Like, was that a factor?
Mhm.
I could see it being that, and that's probably why Hawks would have graded so high, because this team was placed in a bad way several times, especially the defense, and still fought their way through. In addition to that, most naturally, they had the highest rated defense week 1 in the league at a 91 overall, second place being the Vikings at 82.4. So for the youngest coach in the NFL, it just speaks to what a display that, and I'm sure you could start off better. I think you kind of like that everything didn't go perfect. You kind of like that you
Of
saw
course.
you have to battle through some things, and so keeping in mind that they still got the W,
Mhm.
it's exactly what you want to see from a first time head coach.
I couldn't agree more. It's, Denver, 3.3 yards per offensive play, right? Seattle 5.1 offensively, but 3.3 yards per play is really low.
Yeah,
And part of that is, is Bo Nix being a rookie. He's also a dink and dunk quarterback. He's why I don't think he's a legitimate starting quarterback in the NFL, because there's no threat, right? You can bring your safeties way up against Bo Nix because he wants to expand the field horizontally and dink and dunk, and isn't really a threat to go over the top. So the defense can kind of key on that. But 3 point, there's not even 3.5 yards a play that they gave up. That's incredible, right? And then to think about the run game of the Seahawks, and that it was very effective. It was 4.4 yards per rush. They ran for 146 yards. Now, a lot of that is Gino's scramble for the touchdown, but still, that still counts. And so, yeah, I think that the score doesn't tell the whole story.
right.
PFF is telling the other side of the story, which is they played incredibly well. They had a couple of horrendous special teams plays
Right.
and a bad play by a guard that made the score look a lot closer than it actually was. But the reality is the offense and the defense as individual units were very good. I won't say the offense was very good. The running game was good in the second half, and that was enough for them to win. But the defense was dominant, and I don't think that you see the 20 scored by Denver and you think, oh, the Seahawks gave up 20 points. They didn't give up no 20 points. That defense was a lot better than that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that stood out to me. Like you mentioned, like the differences between last year's team and
Mm-hmm.
this year's team. The tackling is one. It was just nice to see how sound fundamentally this team was. And to your point, they did have, believe it or not, they actually did have 11 missed tackles. Now I can't really identify many of them,
Mm-mm.
but there were a few missed tackles involved, but they had 34 stop plays.
Mm-hmm.
34 plays were dead on arrival, stops to play on the spot.
Yep.
And so despite the 11 missed tackles, which was, wait, I really only remember like 2 or 3, seriously. But despite that, those stop, because the stop plays were so much more consistently dead on arrival, no yards after catch. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, not a yard, not 2 yards given. And then you saw multiple guys there. Like, it wasn't just yeah, you saw some really impressive open field tackling on occasion as well. Julian Love did a phenomenal job. You saw
Mm-hmm.
exactly why this team wanted to go ahead and give him an extension on at week 1, like on arrival, like you said, highest rated safety in the league this week. Super excited to see that. But you also just saw guys who you were frankly worried about. Tyrell Dotson looked really good. Your
Mm-hmm.
linebackers, who I had some real trepidation about, you saw it look good. You saw your corners be able to tackle effectively, most notably Tariq Woolen, who overall did not have, well, he had one missed tackle for Reek Woolen. That's pretty good. He had 3 tackles overall. You saw him getting involved. You saw him being physical. He did have 1 stop as well that PFF credits him with. So you saw some real change in that, and that made the overall look of the team better. And we've had years, it was not an issue last year. We actually did pretty well in terms of being able to put pressure on the quarterback. But according to PFF, this team, and I will say PFF does tend to, they're pretty generous with their pass rushes. I'll put out that caveat, but they credited the team with 29 pressures against Bo Nix, which was far more than I got. And Big Leonard Williams leading the crew with 6 pressures himself, 5 quarterback hits. I saw the only other player in week 1 to do that was Micah Parsons, which is crazy to say. So you didn't see them, sack Bo Nix as much. He had 2 sacks for as many pass reps as he got. You'd like to see more sacks than that, perhaps, since he got off so many. Really, do you see somebody that's not Patrick Mahomes throw for 42 passes? But anywho, I think it was a great precedent to continue, not just the increased run play, because really it's been sort of this you can't win, you can't have both. You either have no pass rush and you got your good run defense. Like in 2020, right, this team was elite, top 5 in run defense, but could not rush the pass. That's why they kept blitzing Jamal Adams, because they didn't have any other pass rush anywhere else. And then you saw them get better at pass rush, and then the run defense absolutely corroded before our eyes over the past 2 or 3 years. And so it's really nice to just week 1 see them be great at both. It's just so refreshing. It makes all the difference in the world. I don't think I heard Devin Witherspoon mention that they didn't really even really get into the depth of their playbook, which is also really exciting. They just played pretty vanilla, fundamentally sound football and dominated.
Question for you.
Yeah.
When is Boye Mafe going to be listed ahead of Draymond Jones on the depth chart?
I don't know. I think they play them situationally. It looks like Boye Mafe got more snaps anyway. Boye Mafe got 47 pass rep snaps. 47 pass rep snaps to Draymond Jones's 27. So
when I eyeball just watching the game as a casual, observer, I know Mafe had four tackles, 2 tackles for loss, a sack, right? He put up the numbers, but he just looks like I wouldn't want to be playing quarterback with him on the other side. He's such a force in my mind, and I don't think you can afford to not play him. I think he needs to be on the field more, and if that means it's at the cost of Draymond Jones, then Draymond Jones is a sunk cost, and you let it go. Because I think Mafe looks so explosive and so strong. The tackles can't really hold up against his bull rush, and he's faster than they are. He looked great to me. I'm really excited about he and Hall playing together on either side. I think the level of athleticism from those 2 edges is just different. But yeah, this defense is, like you said, it was pretty vanilla. You didn't see a lot of the 7 guys at the line of scrimmage, and you don't know who's coming. All the stuff that they talked about when Coach McDonald was hired. You didn't see a lot of that this week. I think they're probably saving that for some of the NFC West games if they need it. And if you can get away with winning and not showing all your cards, I think that's a great thing. One thing that might get me or give me a perspective that's not correct or a biased perspective on the Seahawks defense is that Bo Nix is bad. And like I said, I think you can scheme for a quarterback like that very easily. I also think part of why they didn't get that many sacks, but they did get a number of pressures, is he's just snap and go, right? 3 steps, get the ball out of there. That's who he was at Oregon. That's who they want him to be for now in Denver. And so you're not going to get to that quarterback and sack him very often because he's not getting into any kind of, 7-step drops and under center stuff and not a ton of play action as of yet. So I do hesitate a little bit to anoint this defense. I already have, so I guess I can't say this, but, it might be a little bit of Bo Nix as well. But, their line they don't have a bad offensive line. And Javonte Williams looked explosive to me. as a running back. He lost some weight and he looked pretty explosive. Now the receivers are bad. The receivers aren't good, but I guess we need to hold off for a little bit on really crowning them, but the talent is there, the explosiveness is there, the passion is there, the energy is there, the willingness to gang tackle and to tackle, period. It's all present, and you have to do that in order to play for Coach McDonald. It's exciting. And we didn't, like I said, we didn't see much from Byron Murphy, right? We didn't see much from some of these dudes that we expected big things from. So yeah, there's a lot to talk about and a lot to be excited about.
Yeah, to your point about Boye Mafe, he was credited with 9 pressures, so your eyes were correct. Draymond Jones had less snaps significantly so I think that they're following your same theory. I don't care as long as whoever is playing better gets the most snaps. I'm good with that,
Right.
frankly. And so they did the right thing there, so no complaints. But Draymond Jones did have a higher win percentage pressure rate for whatever that is for like his snaps, like his pressure rate. So I think both of them are holding their own, but I think they like what they see from Mafe. They like the upside there, so they're playing him more often. Completely fine with that. I was fine with Byron Murphy as well. He played okay. Had a couple pressures here and there, but I also think that he's playing up against a pretty good offensive line. And to your point about Bo Nix, maybe I'm a little bit more of a sympathizer in part because my husband is a Broncos fan who was sort of licking his wounds yesterday. It was a tough day. Tough evening for him. But I'll say this, and maybe it is me anointing the defense. I'll say that. I might be. But I really, based on what I saw, especially relative to the rest of the league this week, I have Red Zone, so I'm pretty familiar. I mean, Red Zone doesn't give you all the plays for every game, but you see a good sample size of every game that's happening in the NFL. And relatively speaking, I don't think he's that bad. I think he played significantly worse against a defense that thrives on disguise because they actually did do some. Now, they didn't do, I think they have more exotic things than just showing up, stacking up, stack boxes at the line of scrimmage, and you don't know who's coming. They did plenty of that, actually. Like, there were snaps where Jaron Reed and Mike Morris, like, dropping the coverage. And you got cornerbacks going and different with his spoons as he's running at you. So, like, that is very confusing for a rookie. He's never seen anything like that. That's confusing for any quarterback, frankly, but particularly that scheme. And that's really what gave me the confidence for the win the whole time. It's just, that's tough for a rookie to come in and play a defense that thrives on disguise. That's hard. And he's going to play a lot easier defenses, even if they're more talented. They're not going to be that complicated, especially when you saw how Baltimore struggled, without Mike Macdonald. They did not look the same. They didn't look nearly as dominant. Those same pieces didn't take over the game. In fact, Kyle Hamilton had a pretty piss poor game, at least according to PFF standards. And also, if you watch the film, it didn't look good either. Anyway, so I'll say that Bo Nix might be more formidable than he looks right now. But
my counter to that, though, like, so watching Bo Nix at Oregon, he played point guard, right? He was trying to distribute the ball to the different playmakers on the outside. That was his, Marcus Mariota did some of that. And I know Mariota was great at Oregon, but that's kind of the concept in that spread, kind of spread running game. You got the super fast guys on the outside. You got a tight end that can catch. Even watching them this year, they look the same way. But to play NFL quarterback, it's different. And I think if you don't give Bo Nix the weapons to be able to play point guard, or the ability to separate, I think even more important, if you don't have receivers that can separate, he's not going to do anything for you. He's just going to throw a bunch of stuff behind the line and a bunch of bubble screens that may or may not work. And so that's why I don't see him throwing like an 18-yard in route, or going against, throwing a ball to the sideline in back of the corner and in front of the safety when the safety's coming over. I don't think he has the arm strength to do that kind of thing. It's like if you take Geno and you take away Metcalf, right? And you take away the running game, Geno is going to be okay, but he's not going to be good. There's some quarterbacks like Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes that can make you and I look like good receivers. You know what I mean? But That's not Bo Nix. That's not Geno Smith. And so that's the part that I think is interesting is they not only is he limited, I think, as far as what he can do as a quarterback, he may be able to do those things really well, but he's limited in terms of his repertoire, right? The plays that you can call for him, at least right now. And then you add the fact that Cortland Sutton, your number one, is a big, strong, but slow wide receiver who doesn't get a ton of separation, who catches the ball because he's big and kind of can box you out. That's not a good place for your rookie quarterback to be. So I don't know. I'm trying not to be biased. I've never been a big Bo Nix fan. I think he got a little bit. He certainly got overhyped when you compare him to Penix, in my opinion. But I do think that they expose some of the things. If I'm a defensive coordinator, that's what I'm doing. I'm bringing everybody up close, and I'm saying, I dare, and I'm playing, maybe zero man, right? I'm saying, go ahead, go throw to your wide receiver. Let's see if you can get it that far. Let's see if you can throw it far enough to throw deep to your wide receiver. I think my corners can stick with you, and we're putting the other 9 guys, in the box, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, that's a good point. Are there any other big picture things that come to mind before I sort of want to get into something that went under the radar, in my opinion, that I like to bring to the forefront?
Yeah, two things, and they're related. One is, were DK Metcalf's 4 targets related to or because of Patrick Surtain and how good he is? Or do you think that we're going to see less usage from Metcalf over the course of this season? That's my first question. I think a lot of it was just Surtain, and that's how the game flowed. What did you think?
I blame the O-line.
Yeah.
He was willing to throw. In fact, there were opportunities where he threw a Metcalf where he probably should have just taken JSN underneath. Geno was not afraid to throw at Surtain, and there, like I said, there's a couple times where I'm like, was that the best option there of all of the routes that were ran? Like, I do want to see the all 22, but I'm just sort of like, even looking at the broadcast, I'm like, surely that wasn't your best option. Right. So anyway, I don't think it was that. I just think that DK, especially how they plan to use him, is we talked about pretty explosive ways, probably longer developing plays and routes that he's going to be running. And frankly, I just don't think they had the time for that. I think DK would have gotten way more throws and targets his way had they just been able to get them off. But we saw how they had to turn to the run game. I mean, they kind of had to go away from that. Realistically, they had to go away from DK's strength in order to win this game and sort of play more into the strengths of a JSN and a Tyler Lockett, that's who you saw excel. So in my opinion, it wasn't matchup based, because I actually think, despite what the numbers say, and DK had some really rough penalties, but I think despite that, he actually had a pretty good game. Drew several, at least a couple holding penalties to move the sticks in a time where they really needed some kind of offensive rhythm. He was able to make a couple of clutch catches. He did have drops as well, but I thought battle to battle wise, last time Pat Surtain and DK Metcalf matched up, I think Surtain really did get the better of him. I think Metcalf sort of got maybe the better of Surtain in some ways. Now, Surtain is still a great coverage guy, so I'm not saying that he owned them or anything. I'm just saying it was much more back and forth, I think, because Surtain was called for several holding calls, just dealing with the physicality of DK Metcalf, and so I think it still helped the team despite that losing a touchdown was that was tough. But other than that, yeah. So that's my opinion overall. I think that has way more to do with the O-line than anything else. And we'll see how the rest of the season unfolds. But Geno seems intent on involving DK Metcalf in the game plan when possible.
My other big picture thought is I'm very interested to see if this team runs the ball a little more than we maybe expected it to, not necessarily because it's a big philosophical shift as much as this coaching staff seems smart enough to say to themselves, you know what, this is something we do well. Maybe we should capitalize on this a little more. And yes, it was just 1 week and every defense they face is going to be different. I totally understand that. But if they find that their guards can't pass protect, but they can get a running game started, running behind Charles Cross and mixing and matching some guards. And that's where they have some success. I do wonder if this team changes a little bit in its approach because of what it does well and what it doesn't do well. I think a lesser, how do I say this? Some coaching staffs, I think, would just say, this is who we are, this is who we want to be. So we're going to continue to try to throw the ball from the outset, even though our guards are turnstiles, right? Whereas I think a more mature coaching staff, mature just in terms of thought, might say, this might be what we wanted to do when we talked about this team in the offseason. We, in fact, do something else better that will more set us up to succeed. Why don't we try running the ball a little more, controlling the ball a little more, taking some of the pressure off of the guards, having Gino protect the ball a little more, and then saving that defense. That defense can be fresh down the stretch because we were able to play a little more ball control. I don't know that that's what they're going to do, but it's a thought that I had because they had so much success running behind Charles Cross, but did not have success trying to protect for those pass plays, at least in the first half. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. And unless we see some improved guard play here, I think that's what they're going to have to do. Now, the question is, do teams adjust to that? And then how do they navigate? And that's really more my fear with this interior line is that, that's going to be really easy to figure out. And so then teams are just going to set up to stop the run. I'm frankly not confident that they're going to be able to execute that same game plan, game in and game out, particularly if K9 is injured. Zach Charbonnet did struggle on the ground. He had a great receiving touchdown for him, but in terms of efficiency in the run game, that wasn't it because they sort of knew and he didn't have the speed to overcome the other team knowing that we're going to run here. Right. So yeah, I'm not sure how much that actually plays itself out. They're going to have to figure out some other alternatives in my opinion. They're going to have to do some creative things. They're going to have to, utilize a run game in varied fashions to make sure that they keep teams off their feet. Almost Kyle Shanahan-like in terms of creativity is the level of which I think they're going to have to execute if they plan on doing that all year. Because it works with the 49ers. Everybody knows they're going to run the ball, but you just can't stop it. And so I would be impressed, super impressed, if Grubb was able to pull off a run game like that all year. Especially against teams like the 49ers who are going to be better in the trenches altogether. So we'll see, but I anticipate a little bit more quick game. I anticipate them, now they know. They know how this line holds up. Yep. We've seen the ability for Grubb, at least in game one, to adjust. I'm curious to see what a whole game plan based around the limitations of their offensive line looks like. And I think they can do it. They pulled it off on the drop of a hat this past week. I think they can do a good job of still getting DK involved. I heard when they did the mock scrimmage at Lumen Field that DK was in the backfield at times. So I think you might see more of those things. I think those are things they probably wanted to save for later. It's like wrinkles. I don't think they're going to have the luxury now. So we'll see. But it'll be an interesting storyline to follow regardless.
Your point about the quick game, I agree with. I think that's a really good point that we might see more, more slants, more bubble screens, and that stuff Gino excels at, right? Gino's very quick to identify what's going on with the defense, and he's got a good release. He's accurate. That plays into a lot of his strengths, and so I think we will see more of that. I also think we'll see more play action moving forward as well. I expected to see more in this game. I don't know. I didn't see the numbers, but, Grubb ran a lot of play action in the preseason. And so I think they'll roll more play action into their game plan moving forward because that also keeps the rush off of the quarterback, obviously, by running play action. You need to have a successful running game to do it, but the Seahawks seem to have some of that. So, yeah.
They attempted 4 play action passes. In the drop back game.
See, that's very few compared to what they did in the preseason. Now, like you said, that might also be just saving stuff for later. And knowing that the Broncos, I don't know, that's a lot of confidence to just say, you know what, we're going to run vanilla stuff and we're going to win. But they may not have felt like they needed to take that out. But yeah, it's game plan wise, it is going to be very fascinating to see what they do in these next couple of games. New England's defense is good, right? New England's offense isn't very good, but the defense can play and they're traveling across the country. So to me, this is going to be a challenging game, specifically for the offense. It'll be very, even though Barmore is out, you don't run the ball against New England very easily, right? They're one of the few teams that still have those big thumper middle linebackers that are there to stop the run. So it's going to be, like I said, very fascinating to watch that game for sure.
And speaking of coaches and adjustments in the run game, this is one of those more underrated things that I sort of wanted to bring to light. I was pleasantly surprised with the lack of creativity in the Broncos run game.
Mm-hmm.
Like on the opposite side, they just, especially in that second half, just kept running B gap up the B gap. Like they just kept running just straight up the middle, despite the fact. And I understand initially why you would do that. You're coming into this game. This is one of the worst run defense teams in the league. You're going to test that. You're going to see if they've improved in that area. But this is an entire different coaching staff. And to some extent, and they didn't have Leonard Williams even all of last year. And so it became apparent, right? Especially in that third quarter, that like that ain't working.
Right.
But Sean Payton just continued to call those run plays when they did attempt, which became more sparingly as the game went on, because obviously Seattle took control of the game. They had to pass more. But when they did attempt to run, there was no creativity. For Sean Payton, who's supposed to be an offensive guru mind, going against Ryan Grubb, you saw far more diversity of run. You saw far more change in formations. You saw far more, I'd say, timing of when they're calling run plays. And granted, Broncos come from behind, so the timing isn't going to be what they want it to be. But I just take a look at out of curiosity, I looked at the PFF kind of breakdown, and they kind of ran up that left side like almost double the amount of attempts that they ran anywhere else. Up the middle, 19 attempts, and then to that left side, a combination of what looks like, no, not that, sorry, not the 19 yards. That was two attempts, but it looks like they ran up the middle a few times, so far more that they run up to that left side, and they really just kind of kept hammering it. It didn't work. So that's a coach who just decided to stick with his game plan. On the opposite side, didn't really, his adjustments didn't seem to be there. I understand that they went into halftime with the lead, but I don't know how you don't anticipate that Seattle might make adjustments to how that went, and you make counter adjustments. They didn't seem to do that. So it's even more, to me, impressive by Grubb is just seeing, in my opinion, how, especially in that second half, Grubb severely outcoached Sean Payton, one of the greatest offensive minds, reputation-wise, in the NFL today.
Are the Broncos trying to win?
Good question.
Honestly, I feel like
good question.
You're starting a rookie. Now I know he's experienced and played at Auburn and all those things. You starting a rookie quarterback with an okay offensive line and way below average weapons, right? Javonte Williams looked explosive. Can you say he's probably an average NFL running back? Courtland Sutton, Josh Reynolds, Marvin Mims Jr., that's a way below average wide receiving core. Josh Reynolds is a third down receiver at his best. Mims has speed and hasn't done anything yet. And Courtland Sutton has had 1,000-yard seasons, but he's a big, slower possession type guy who can win 50-50 balls. And then the defense, it's like Surtain, and that's it. They're starting Cody Barton, right? Cody Barton couldn't get on the field for the Seahawks barely. Don't get me started on Riley Moss. I'm not going there, but everybody did online. You've got a bunch of cast-offs. Baron Browning was an athlete coming out of Ohio State, but didn't have a position and wasn't really like a good player yet. They've got these names on defense that there's just not a lot of winning players on this team. And I know if someone was to ask Sean Payton that question, I'm sure he would say, yes, we're trying to win. Don't be silly. But when you look at this team, you do have to wonder, are they playing for next year, 2 years from now, or are they playing for this year? And part of that is, again, starting Bo Nix over those other two guys. So again, it gets me back to, is this real insight into who the Seahawks are? Or were the Seahawks holding something back because they knew the Broncos weren't going to win? Or, are we seeing the Seahawks through rose-colored glasses because they're going against a team that really isn't that good? I don't know what the answer is, but I do think it's interesting to examine this roster and this team and ask the question: are they actually trying to win right now?
I think here's my initial thought, just because I do hear a lot of information since my husband is a Broncos fan.
Mm-hmm.
My guess, my theory, the front office could care less about winning this year
Mm-hmm.
because they made moves to signify that, getting rid of Tim Patrick, getting rid of Jerry Jeudy, getting rid of Justin Simmons. I think they made moves because of the Russell situation that they decided to prioritize future players.
Mm-hmm.
I think, though, based on how the depth chart and stuff is gone, because I don't think Marvin Mims played at all. And that's somebody who, if you're looking to the future, you probably want to get some reps for if he's going to be, potentially a good wide receiver for you. I don't think Sean Payton is of the mindset of a rebuild, despite the fact that he's given rebuilding tools. So
Right.
that's my take on that. I think insight is to that. I think they see that they can get to the playoffs because the Chargers are such a question mark. The Raiders are obviously probably going to be the worst in the division. So they see a path to be the second best team in the division and still get the playoffs. So I think Sean Payton's in it, but they sure didn't make it easy for him. No question about it when you look at that roster.
Mm-mm. Not at all.
No.
Not at all.
Any other like underrated things for you that like things that people aren't necessarily talking about, but that you paid attention to?
Um, I'm excited. I still think, like, I don't think Chenault did much, but I'm still excited to see what he can do, both in the return game and as he calls it, like the rack guy or the run after catch guy,
Yeah.
in this offense. I don't think they did much of that. And then, I watched a lot of the UW games last year, and if they can get the offensive line to protect in the passing game, I really want to see what JSN and Metcalf can do with this offense. And we didn't get to see a whole lot of that. We saw, I think there was one catch by JSN that was really pretty, right? The route was pretty. You could see the potential there. And I'm waiting, and I know that's not under the radar, but I'm waiting to see that. I think there's an explosion that's ready to happen with this offense that can't happen if we don't get the line play, but could be very, very special if the line does hold up. Other than that, I don't know. I'm so defense focused right now because that defense played so well. I will
Yeah.
say Julian Love played. I haven't been his biggest fan. I kind of think of him as a league average or slightly above league average free safety. And I think they see him differently based on the contract they gave him. And his first game was outstanding. And that to me is, I won't say it's under the radar, but it's a surprise. I did not expect that coming into this season, to say that Julian Love was the number one safety according to PFF in week one. That was not on my bingo card. Let's say that. Right. And I love it because I don't know that I value safety play in that way. I think free safety play is very important, but you see what a defense can be if that back line is solid, right? If you've got a smart, intelligent, athletic player that can play sideline to sideline and make the right decisions all the time. We haven't had that since Earl Thomas.
Yep.
And we saw what the impact Earl Thomas in his prime had on a football game. You could play single high and get away with it all day long because Earl Thomas was there to patrol the back. And I'm not saying that that's who Julian Love is. Completely different style of player, completely different player in general. But I do think his value, he adds a ton to this defense if he continues to do what he's been doing.
Yeah. Something interesting that I saw is they play AJ Barner quite a bit for Brady Russell to be ahead of him in the depth chart. Brady Russell only got 4 snaps to AJ Barner's 32
Yep.
snaps. And when they played, it's actually pretty even, at least according to PFF. Now, I'm not going to pretend like I've looked at the film to really compare these two players,
Right.
but they've got AJ as a 57 overall graded, while Brady Russell was a 58.6 overall graded. And AJ Barner, I did notice, had one particularly notable run block, I think on a K9 run that contributed to a touchdown. They gave him a 67 run
Mhm.
block grade, which is good to see because that's really, I mean, that's what he was, right? Like that's what he was touted as when you drafted him. You didn't expect him to be a receiver, like a receiving guy. That was pretty much going to be Noah Fant's role.
Mhm.
But to see him come in and block well, because he didn't look like he was blocking that well in the preseason to me. I looked
Mhm.
at him and I was like, yeah, very much a work in progress. But the fact that he got that many snaps seems like he must have made some sort of turn in
Mhm.
practice for them to be playing him as much as they did. So something that no one's talking about that I think is good. I think you can get some meaningful things out of Barner as at the tight end room. The upside for the tight end room goes up a bit. I think there's still far too many blockers and not enough receivers, but
Okay.
I think the
I like
upside is still there.
I also think he probably took the snaps that were planned for Pharaoh Brown.
Yeah.
And
But
so,
but
and,
Brady
and then,
Russell was third on the depth chart. So you would think Russell would have got him.
for me, I wonder if the role, because Pharaoh Brown is such a good run blocker, I
Yeah,
wonder if that particular role
that's fair.
was fit Barner better. So they said, you
Yeah.
know what, next man up, let's go, let's see what you have.
Yeah, that's
And
fair.
then he was placed in that role and actually performed better than anybody expected him to. I remember like I remember watching the game thinking, man, that's Barner. That was a great block. Like, where'd that come from? I remember that from Michigan, but I didn't, we had talked about him as a potential cut candidate almost,
Right.
because he played so poorly. Um, we should discuss quickly the George Fant injury and what that means.
Mhm.
So George
Think we're
Fant got
screwed.
hurt. And has there been an update as to what it is or what, I know it was a knee, but he didn't come back once he left in the first quarter, correct?
No, no, he was ruled out pretty quickly, which is
So
never great when you hear that. Mike McDonald did not have an update. What he did his Mike McDonald show with Brock and Salk. I did listen to a big portion of that, and he said no update on either him nor K9. Now earlier with Kenneth Walker, he'd said kind of previously that they were optimistic about that, but doesn't seem to be any update on Fant. Um, I they said they were doing. I think they're doing testing still. It
so what
surprised me
so
if
is
we
it
heard
is it
anything.
Jarrell? Is it Forsyth?
Forsyth is who they played when Fant went out.
So
So
so Forsyth and Red, you want to see a left hand dominant run game? If it's Forsyth on the right side and Cross on the left side,
that's
they're
how they
running.
played it. That's
We're gonna run left
Forsyth.
all day long. That's gonna be so left that offense is gonna be so left-handed if that's the case. That's scary to me, right?
Yeah.
Because now you're at your third string right tackle.
Mm-hmm. Um, yeah, it got so bad in that first half that I was like, just put in all the rookies at this point. Like, I just rather see
Let me see
dudes who
Jarrell.
have upside mess up instead of dudes who've been in this league
Right.
messing up. But Stone Forsythe did hold his own. He was given a 61 grade and PFF 66 run blocking, so that was sort of more his what he did better. He played 54 of the 67 snaps, so he pretty much played most of the game. I we all know that I really hate Stone Forsythe because I'll say this. He always has whiffs, and his whiffs are some of the most embarrassing looking whiffs. And so that's what sticks in my mind. I put that out there. It is true because he had to have played better than some of those bad whiffs in order to get a 61 because PFF has given him some terrible grades.
Right. Right.
Last season, he got terrible grades all across the board. So that is an improvement for him. And I'm sure how Grubb called the games was also more to his advantage. Grubb seems to be better at putting the
Right.
offensive linemen in position to succeed relative to their talent. But it is scary, man. I'm not gonna pretend like that I'm all good with that. I was higher on Fant than you were for sure.
Mhm.
But I did think he would have, and I was worried about the health too, but I did think he would hold up more than like what was it, 13 snaps is what we got out of that. Really hoping it's not anything too serious. there's no update in my mind. That's good news. Almost like with Nwosu, where, typically when it comes to season-ending injuries, that news comes out pretty fast. We've had no confirmation of anything yet.
Mm.
Same thing with Artie Burns when we thought he was down, like you just didn't hear anything. I think the injury thing is going to be particularly frustrating with this regime. Mike McDonald has zero interest really in talking about injuries, and he does not really like to give any insight on any of that.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of apparent at this point. That means it's going to be a waiting game.
Mm-hmm. It'll be interesting because I think you may see more of the blocking tight end that has to play, next to the right tackle in order to help out. You see a lot more chipping. I do think it could cut down on some of the creativity of the offense.
Right.
If you're playing Forsyth or whomever over there on the right side, because he's going to need help. But and as much as I trash George Fant, whoever's next after George Fant ain't gonna be George Fant. It's slim pickings. Mike Jarrell's coming from I want to call it NAIA, but it's not called that anymore. FCS school,
Yeah.
right? And was the 7th round or 6th round pick and a project. And I know he's got athleticism, but you're going to throw him in there against NFL edges. That's a big ask. So to me, I'm really paying attention to that injury this week. That'll be the biggest news coming out of Seahawks camp to me this week is whether George Fant is available for week 2.
And does that injury, to your point about the tight end thing, do they push Noah Farrell Brown to see if they can test the boundaries with him? Do they give him a little limited reps? Do they see if he can progress in that way a little bit faster than maybe they would have if they didn't need the extra run blocking support or just the blocking support in general? My guess is you might see them rush that process a little bit, potentially. I mean, we don't know this regime's philosophy on injuries, if they're super conservative about it or not, but I think that's a possibility just because, and you do need some reinforcement there. I think they're going to try to scheme those reinforcements. And if you can have a consistent blocker at tight end, as Barner is, very up and down still, you can have a more consistent guy. I think that definitely be what they prefer.
Right. You have a vet and Farrell Brown over there.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's big. I just want to give some shout outs, some flowers to Tyler Lockett, who everybody assumed is washed. It is something that people are talking about, so it's not exactly underrated per se.
He's not washed?
He's not washed. He is not washed. He does not look washed. Highest grader receiver on this team, and it's not even close. Still looked able to do everything that he needed to do. Tyler Lockett talked about it in one of his pressers maybe a week or two ago, that he was used as a decoy quite a bit last season. And so some of the dip in production was because they asked him to be a decoy. And so you wonder, that's sort of, I'll say that this game kind of solidifies that a little bit. You saw him miss some catches that or drop some catches he would have gotten in the past last year, but you also just saw him used less frequently. Him being able to come out right out of the gate week 1 and have probably one of the higher graded rates of his career. I mean, 77 yards on 6 catches, man, that's pretty great. So anyway, just to see him come out and eat the way that he did and take advantage of the defense the way he did and his savvy veteranness, and everybody sort of wrote him off, does speak to the fact that maybe he was speaking some truth when he was a decoy, and then I'm going to ask him to be a decoy this year. So we'll see. A storyline to continue to watch. JSN, you didn't get as much out of that as you'd love to see, but again, that's attributed to the game plan. So I think that's really it for me. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. It's really hard to critique anybody on defense. Everybody on defense looked really good. There's really not a player that sticks out to me. A lot of times I'm looking at like storylines and things that people aren't paying attention to. It's like, hey, notice this was a slight downturn here or improvement there. This defense was so consistent across the board. I mean, Yeah, you had some high guys like Julian Love, Tariq Woolen, Devin Witherspoon, but for the most part, everyone was just solid.
Mhm.
So like outside of those three guys,
And that's what we said all off season was just do your job.
yeah,
None of these, busted gaps, busted assignments, dudes running for 35 yards a pop because the guy was, the linebacker wasn't in the right spot. That
yep,
was 2 years ago. That's what was happening without Wagner there to, control traffic, right? And then Wagner comes in and he's able to get people in the right spots, but they didn't play that well.
mhm,
And so there are a lot of missed tackles, a lot of like, not that they were lacking athleticism, but it just looked different. Now you saw a defense where you're right. I went down the list. There's nobody I can criticize. They all did their job. They all did their job, and a couple of them went above and beyond, right? This defense was just, it was airtight. And that's cool. That's not something we could say for, again, probably since LOB. That's like the last time we could actually say the defense did its job and was that solid. As you said earlier, it's either great run defense, terrible pass defense, no pass rush, or great pass defense but the team just ran the ball the whole game because we couldn't stop the run.
right.
Right? This was a very balanced effort, and I don't know, to me, very exciting moving forward. Very, very, very exciting.
There is one thing that stands out to me. That is an underrated storyline. So Jonathan Hankins only played 17 snaps on
Mhm.
defense, and they played 69 total snaps. There's been a lot of talk about the big guy in the middle and the nose tackle and how much size they need, and that's why you didn't see Reed playing nose as much. That they had him more at three tech because under Mike McDonald, he wanted like these big guys.
Mhm.
I'm not sure that bears out in week one because they were still able to have a really good run defense. And again, these aren't the best running backs you're going to see this year, no question about it.
Mhm.
But at least in week one, from what we have seen, they were able to do really well in containing the run game with only getting 17 snaps from a true big nose tackle. So
Mhm.
I've always felt that whole body type of how you stop the run is a little bit overrated. And it's something I'm going to continue to watch.
Mhm.
But I did feel like I'm a little bit justified in that take, just looking at how these snap counts broke down yesterday. That didn't seem to be a priority, and it didn't stop them one bit in their ability to stop the run. In fact, one of their best run defenders was Stephen Witherspoon,
Right.
who had like 5 tackles or something. I mean, let me see if I make sure
I would say
I'm
that
being accurate. 3 tackles in the run.
depends on the opposition too, right? If you go up against a tough running game or you go up against some really great guard play, that he might be more necessary against those teams.
Yeah,
But that
sure.
part of it is if you're not scared of the run and you're not scared of the other team's offense, you don't need your 350-pound dude in the middle, right?
Yeah,
Because you can stop it regardless. Now, if
right.
you're going against the Niners, he's there against the Niners. He's there to play against some of those teams where it's hard to stop the run.
Yeah,
I think that's why he's here. So I think you're right, that he's not necessary for every game. And people wanted to pump up how much Mike McDonald wants that big road grader in the middle.
mhm,
But I think it's necessary. It's just not necessary against the Denver Broncos in 2024.
yeah. That's fair. That's fair.
Mhm.
All right, man. Well, overall, I mean, you had the hiccups. Those are things, as we sort of wrap up here, I feel like a lot of things that went wrong yesterday outside of the interior offensive line that continues to be a worry for me. In fact, if we had reinforcements coming in at the guard spots, I'd feel great about this whole team right
Right.
now. But I think the mistakes and the miscues are very fixable. You can definitely clean a lot of those up, especially because a lot of them were the results of a ton of first time head coaches. And so if that's and we don't know if it's their floor,
Right.
but it kind of looks like one. It kind of as bad as that looked in that first half there, that kind of looks like about as bad as you can get from a first time head coach outside of a Nathaniel Hackett. game move or
I
the
forgot
season.
about him. Yeah.
Yeah, outside of that, that's probably that first half is about as bad as it can look. So you see a floor, and then you saw them the ability again to bounce back from that. Makes me
Mhm.
feel really great about the direction that as they have time, as they gain continuity, as they see, what works well for their players in real time, that this team can get so much better. Like that's really what's exciting to me. Like on both sides of the ball, there's so much room for growth and you're still so pleased with the floor. Like this team still looks like a team that we thought like they could be, like a team that can push for the playoffs if things fall right. They do need things to fall right. Right now, the Rams are just as injured. It looks like they've lost Puka Nacua. We'll see where he ends up being. They lost they lost No Boom. I think it was another offensive
Mhm.
lineman that they lost last night. And they also lost that game. So we'll see how the Rams end up falling out. So in the division, there still is plenty of opportunity to still push
Mhm.
for not just the playoffs, but I don't know if we'll push to win the division or not, but push to definitely be in that
A shot.
conversation
You
at
got a
least.
shot.
You got a
Hmm.
shot. Exactly. That's all you can ask. All right, Tina, you want to tell the people where they can find you?
For sure. You can find me at Ethos Mariners doing the Mariners podcast. Uh, right now, that's about it. Work schedule changed, working early in the mornings. Lots of fun, but trying to adjust and definitely leaves a little bit less energy for all that other stuff. But you can find me there. You can find me on the couch watching football Saturdays and Sundays. Now it's here. I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. Be sure to follow the show at Ethos Seahawks. We'll have some latest news updates, try to post some statistics and things like that I find as I sort of deep dive on this film throughout the week. But anyway, that's all the time we have for today. That's it. We're out. And as always,
Go
go
Hawks.
Hawks.